Hey everyone, today we are going to talk to you about increasing identification services for diverse rural gifted students. And we will be talking to you about presenters who are part of the I-REECCH. We'll give you an overview of I-REECCH program. We'll also talk a little bit about design thinking, problems of practice, and what are the next steps for I-REECCH. And so the presenters today are Dr. Kristina Hesbol, who is I-REECCH co-PI. She is also an associate professor at Education Leadership and Policy Studies Department, University of Denver. Dr. Norma Hafenstein, she is the PI for I-REECCH. She is also a Daniel L. Ritchie Endowed Chair in Gifted Education at University of Denver. I myself am Fayaz Amiri. I'm an I-REECCH graduate assistant and University of Denver, and my colleague, Joi Lin, is also an I-REECCH graduate assistant at University of Denver. So to give you an overview of I-REECCH, we'll be talking about personnel, goals and target populations, the key activities that we have in I-REECCH. We'll also tell you a little bit about ECHO-DU and the programming and evaluation aspects of I-REECCH. Further, so I-REECCH is a U.S. Department of Education Jacob K. Javits Gifted and Talented Student Education Program. This was awarded for 5 years, starting at 2020 and goes all the way to 2024. And I-REECCH stands for Impacting Rural Education through Expanding Culturally Responsive Curriculum, Computer Science Training, and Other Thinking Skills Development. We would encourage you to please follow and go to our portfolio. The link is provided there, which is portfolio.du.edu/ireecch. And now my colleague Joi Lin will continue the presentation further. Thank you.
I-REECCH personnel consists of the I-REECCH research team based at the University of Denver, with Dr. Norma Hafenstein, Principal Investigator, Dr. Kristina Hesbol, Co-Principal Investigator, Dr. Lindsay Reinert, our Postdoc Program Manager, and 2 graduate assistants, Joi Lin, myself, and Fayaz Amiri. We have an evaluation team from APA Consulting, consisting of Robert Reichert, Dale D. Cesari, and Brianna McGagan. Our 2 I-REECCH content advisors are also from the University of Denver, Dr. Kimberly Schmidt and Dr. Brett Garner. And then we have an advisory board consisting of 5 eminent professors and professionals, Dr. Terrence Blackman, Dr. Joy Esquiardo, Dr. Muhammad Khalifa, Dr. Holly Mackey, and Dr. Rebecca McKinney. And then we have I-REECCH grant leadership team leads from various educational administrative units throughout rural Colorado. And our AUs consist of schools, school districts, and boards of cooperating educational services, or BOCES. We also have a sovereign nation tribal school as a part of our participant base. And all of our participants are K through 5 elementary rural schools in Colorado. The overarching goal of I-REECCH is to significantly increase identification of and services to traditionally underrepresented, gifted and talented student populations in rural Colorado. The populations we're targeting for equitable impact include English language learners, Hispanic and Native American students, and students eligible for free and reduced lunch. We have 4 key goals in I-REECCH. Significantly increase identification of talent and giftedness in traditionally underrepresented populations in rural settings, including English language learners, students who identify as Hispanic or Native American, and students eligible for free and reduced lunch to the state average for gifted identification, which in 2019-2020 was 7.3%. We also hope to develop and implement direct service to underrepresented rural students in STEM areas, specifically computer programming and computational thinking. Improve classroom practices through significantly increasing rural faculty implementation of critical thinking skill development and talent and giftedness recognition. And improve classroom practices through significantly increasing rural faculty and principal ability to implement culturally responsive teacher and leadership supports for culturally and linguistically diverse learners. I-REECCH has 12 key activities. To train school leadership teams, SLTs, to make data-informed decisions to support GT, train SLTs on Colorado Department of Education gifted and talented pathways, and train SLTs on computational thinking, culturally responsive teaching and leadership practices, and higher order thinking skills, such as critical thinking, including the depth and complexity framework. We are working to develop virtual professional learning curriculum and instruction using ECHO.du, which I'll talk about more in a moment. Deliver annual virtual ECHO professional learnings for SLTs. Use design thinking and iterative Plan, Do, Study, Act PDSA cycles to improve rural student outcomes. Develop a cadre of rural teachers, principals, and coaches to lead best practices. Identify appropriate, culturally sensitive, gifted, and talented assessment instructions and account for language differences. Connect rural school students electronically with students in high-performing schools to collaborate on problem solving. And develop an I-REECCH website, sharing resources with all. And as Fayaz mentioned, that is portfolio.du.edu/IREECCH. ECHO.du stands for Extension for Community Healthcare Outcomes at DU. The ECHO program was developed in New Mexico by a physician hoping to foster professional learning with multiple physicians across the state. And at DU, we use ECHO to develop virtual professional learnings using Zoom. ECHO principles include using technology to leverage scarce resources, sharing best practice solutions to reduce disparities, applying case-based learning to master complexity, and evaluating and monitoring outcomes. For our programming so far, in spring 2021, we offered ECHOs with special didactic presenters and case studies. In the summer of 21, we offered professional learning courses and workshops focused on culturally linguistically diverse education for gifted learners and culturally responsive teaching and leadership. This fall in 21, we're offering ECHOs with special didactic presenters and case studies once again. And really we're focused on identifying characteristics of different populations and helping us better identify giftedness in those target populations. Upcoming, we have leader-targeted professional learning and ongoing ECHOs. For evaluation, we're data collecting to identify more equitable gifted identification and shifts in teacher and leader attitudes and practices expanding services. So far, we've collected leader interviews, teacher and leader surveys, case studies, focus groups, and data collection regarding identification, numbers, and demographics at our AUs.
Hi, my name is Kristina Hesbol. I'm an associate professor in the Educational Leadership and Policy Studies Department at Morgridge College at the University of Denver. And I'm delighted to share with you about the design thinking process that we've integrated into our professional learning in this grant. We designed this project so that it's not something extra for participants, readily acknowledging the dramatic and disproportionate impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on rural schools, illuminating structural inequities that are significant faced by rural school leaders and teachers and communities. I-REECCH is designed specifically to develop equity-focused, inclusive, and innovative rural educators, teachers, and leaders, as they recognize local disparities that result in the under-identification of historically marginalized students who identify as Hispanic, Native American, emergent bilingual, or economically under-resourced. A focus on equity requires a purposeful redistribution of power and resources to repair what Gloria Ladson-Billings refers to as the moral educational debt owed to historically marginalized students. This call for activism needs to be addressed by teacher and leader preparation and professional development programs as well, providing a deeper and broader perspective on a continuum of nuanced rural educational contexts. Rural schools are impacted by deep and persistent poverty. More than 9 million students attend rural schools, and in 23 states, a majority are from economically under-resourced families. Minoritized students are at greater risk of poverty across the nation, but disparities are widely diverse. Recruitment of teachers, particularly in hard-to-staff subjects, and higher percentages of teachers outside their certification areas are other capacity constraints. Our research team has taught participants about several tools from an emerging method known as design improvement, the intersection between improvement science and design thinking. Using design improvement strategies fosters adult learning, encouraging collective responsibility for learning around common mental models, and it consists of 5 stages: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Initially, in the empathize stage, we introduced our practitioner thought partners to the practice of an empathy interview, in which we delve deeply into multiple perspectives for the user experience. We observe, notice, explore points of view, and challenge biases. We ask such questions as, what exactly is the behavior I'm trying to change? What causes the behavior? What forces, factors, or circumstances keep it in place? And what must people learn or unlearn to limit the power of these circumstances and to change the problem behavior? Then we asked our site participants to identify their persistent and complex problems of practice in the define stage. In order to develop a clear understanding of the problem, we introduced the 5 whys, a process that explores the root causes of our identified problem. For example, the first question might be, why is our achievement in math so low? The response was because our students do not have academic skills to participate in higher level math courses. The resulting second question would be, why are our students lacking academic math skills for higher level math courses? The response was because we have the highest class failure in 4th grade math classes. The third why would then be, why do we have the highest class failure in 4th grade math courses? The response was because students come unprepared for 4th grade math. The fourth why do students come unprepared for 4th grade math? Resulted in the response because they are lacking basic math skills and understanding. And finally, the 5th why was, why are they lacking basic math skills and understanding? Which was responded to by, because they have holes in their skills and understanding of basic math. And so our practitioner partners could then begin a PDSA cycle to generate a solution to the problem. As our practice research partnership teams move into the ideation stage, they will test new ideas or prototypes to see how they improve the problem of practice, which is, of course, aligned to the single project goal of increasing the identification of and service to diverse learners. In this non-linear process, the test phase will disclose insights that redefine the problem, and the iterative cycle will continue several times until measurable improvement is identified. In this graphic, you can see the nonlinear stages, excuse me, that I've just described in terms of design thinking and improvement, from empathize to define, to ideate, to prototype, and then to test. So a PDSA, or a Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle, is an iterative 4-stage problem-solving model used for improving a process. Participants plan their iterations that will provide clear data that are connected to their aim statement or goal. Before they test their hypothesis, our participants make predictions about the probable outcome. They design changes in practice to test based on the team's goal and their theory of improvement. If we do X, then Y. They create a research plan that includes the data collection and the tools that will be used for this purpose, the who, the when, and the where. When they're ready to apply their intervention, or the do part, the team applies the plan, takes careful notes, and documents their observations. Any surprises are noted here as well. Once data have been collected, then the team studies what happened, the study part of the process. We'll analyze and display data and examine the original theory of action to see how it's holding, and we'll make adjustments if needed, revising the new hypothesis to reflect the new learning. During the ACT phase of the cycle, the team identifies next steps, which can include any of the following: adopt, adapt, abandon, or adjust. We'll repeat this iterative cycle through several iterations, identifying progress toward the aim statement with clear evidence. We'll also discuss how we know that the change is in fact an improvement and in what we learned from it. District or school partners design the continuous inquiry cycles at their site using design improvement and PDSA models, both. In our ECHO learning sessions, our I-REECCH research team collaborates with our site partners as we collaboratively review their PDSA drafts, resulting in joint ownership of any conclusions and next step decisions. The benefits we're identifying in researching on-site practice research partnerships include the following. 1, high-quality evidence sources are organized for ease of practitioner review and interpretation, research-based strategic planning, and peer coaching from our I-REECCH team's technical assistants. This process supports collaborative improvement efforts that connect with school staff and thereby identify the most promising areas for improvement building on local strengths. 2, the network provides connections to others in similar rural contexts that make participating with a dynamic networked improvement community possible for possibly the first time. These connections in affinity groups that are focused by improvement topics jumpstart local efforts in continuous improvement learning. And 3, experience using evidence sources and common research-based review frameworks as a reflective colleague with rural peers enhances educators' sense of professionalism and efficacy about their own practice, leading to both improved practice, and a greater sense of connection to their local school and community. Some of our rural partners have reported having to hire emergency certificated teachers who don't yet have a bachelor's degree. So these professional learning opportunities in our grant provide just-in-time learning for novice as well as experienced teachers and leaders.
Hello, I'm Norma Hafenstein, and I am pleased to talk with you today more about our I-REECCH project. Specifically, I'm going to be sharing about problems of practice. When we first think of problems of practice, we may feel like this is a negative. But in fact, these problems are opportunities for us to recognize in the setting in which we are working, opportunities for us to collaborate, and ultimately opportunities for us to work together to have an impact and influence together with the communities with whom we are working. I'd like to tell you a story. Think about 7-year-old Mario. Mario came into school not knowing any English. Within the very first year of coming into school, Mario had taught himself to read in English and was reading at the 3rd grade level. I would say that's a demonstration of giftedness. However, because Mario didn't pass the test that was used by a particular setting, Mario was not eligible, according to that setting, for gifted services. There's an opportunity embedded in that environment for us to recognize gifts and talents and work together to collaborate on making a difference for the lives of these children. Let's also think about some disproportionality issues. For example, a setting might have an overall population of over 60% students identifying as Latino or Hispanic, but in the gifted population that's identified, less than 30% of those students are Latino or Hispanic. Conversely, a district might have a population that is 64% white, and at the same time, that gifted percentage of 64% far exceeds the overall population of just 30% white students in the overall demographic. Again, an opportunity, a problem of practice to be addressed. So let's look at some specific problems of practice identified by our partner sites. One of these specific problems of practice was stated that there's a lack of understanding among the school community, including families and staff both, of what giftedness is and how to identify students from traditionally underrepresented populations. Another setting discussed identification trends that were more representative at the school level than the district, and that the identification rate was only 3.7%, as opposed to the 7% overall recommended by the state. Interestingly, in this particular setting, there was a lack of inclusion of female students identified for gifted services. Another site recognized that the representative number of Latino or ELL students did not represent the overall population, even though their identified students were at 7%. Another site described a persistent lack of understanding about the purpose and importance of gifted education across all stakeholder groups: faculty, staff, families, community members. And then another identified persistent problem of practice from one of our partner sites was lacking math achievement in historically marginalized groups. These particular problems of practice were identified by the sites, and then collaboratively, the sites worked together using a fishbone strategy activity to generate potential action items. So for example, this particular illustration addresses identification of underrepresented students, especially English language learners, students eligible for free and reduced lunch, and Latino students. Each of the aspects of the fishbone diagram recognize particular aspects that can be addressed. For example, what kind of background knowledge is potentially impacting the persistent problem of practice that we see? Understanding giftedness was another specifically identified area. For example, teacher turnover has a huge impact on understanding what kind of gifted behaviors might be recognized within the faculty itself. Communication. We think about communication, there can always be more, and communication loops that happen rather than just one-way communication. But what about new students? How are new students included in the screening process or potential identification process for gifted education? And that communication from grade to grade, vertically and horizontally, and across school to school within an overall district. Cultural values has the potential to impact this persistent problem of practice or opportunity. Biases, also an important aspect as we ourselves examine our own biases about what giftedness means, what beliefs we might have, and how that might influence our day-to-day practice. And then language, considering language as a way that could potentially be supportive or could potentially be challenging. And the teacher's lack of knowledge around language acquisition, actually mirroring back to our example of Mario. it's been my pleasure to talk with you about persistent problems of practice in our settings and share with you an example of a fishbone diagram as a strategy to begin to generate ideas for potential impact.
Next steps include further work to develop affinity groups and a growing networked improvement community. All of this work is done in service of increasing the number of identified gifted students, particularly those who identify as members of traditionally marginalized groups. We will introduce driver diagrams and systems maps in order to see the system that is producing the current outcomes at each site. We'll continue to familiarize participants with their own data. With such a small N at each school and district, educators have often overlooked the power of a deep dive into their own data. We will continue a relentless pursuit of their focused, specific goals, collectively identifying strategies and tools with which to measure their improvement throughout the life of this grant. As we provide models of best practice, we are starting to transfer the conversation to case studies that are brought to our ECHO sessions using de-identified data and describing the presumed problem of practice. In this way, we recognize our practice thought partners as the true experts in the field, learning how to use their own resources as well as to network with grant colleagues from other rural schools and districts to share about their own successes or bright spots. Thank you for joining us today. For more information, please feel free to contact us at this email address.